Mira Ohen packed one bag. She did not cry. She had finished crying over things she could not change a long time ago, the year her mother came home from somewhere she refused to name, and spent 3 months flinching at the smell of wood smoke. The village elders announced the tribute on a Tuesday morning, in the square, the way they announced everything: flat voices, no eye contact, names read from a paper as if the names were not attached to people. One woman from each low-rank pack, delivered to the Alpha King's castle before the next moon. Her name was the fourth one called. Nobody argued. Nobody ever did. She packed her healer's kit first, then one change of clothes, then the small jar of lavender and calendula salve she had been making for 3 months, the one she mixed at night by the fire when the rest of the house was asleep, grinding the dried petals down until her wrist ached. She put it in the center of the bag, wrapped in cloth, and told herself it was because the glass was fragile. She did not let herself think too hard about why she wanted to bring something she had made herself. There were 43 women in the cart. Mira counted them before they left, because she counted things when she was frightened. It was a habit from childhood, from the nights her mother woke screaming, and Mira would lie in the dark naming every plant she knew, until her heart slowed down. 2 women had broken wrists from resisting the guards. One was 14 years old. The ledger the elders submitted listed her age as 18. Mira splinted the broken wrists with strips torn from her own undershirt. She sat beside the 14-year-old girl, whose name was Fen, and she did not tell her everything would be fine. She had never been able to say things she did not believe. She said, "Eat the bread while it is warm." Fen ate the bread. The journey took 6 days. Mira memorized the roads. She catalogued which guards rotated and when. She noted that the cart stopped at the same river crossing each evening, and that the ford was shallow enough to walk, and that the forest on the eastern bank was dense enough to disappear into. She did not run, not because she was not brave enough, because she was not willing to leave 42 other women in the cart while she did. The castle was not what she expected. The stone was too clean. The guards did not touch them when they arrived. A steward met them in the main courtyard, a thin man with tired eyes who spoke in a flat, careful voice, and assigned each woman a room. An actual room, with a bed, and a door that locked from the inside. Mira stood in the center of her room for a long time, turning the key over in her hand. She had prepared herself for many things on the journey here. She had not prepared herself for a lock she controlled. She locked the door anyway, and stood with her back against the wood, trying to locate what was wrong about kindness delivered inside a cage. She did not sleep well, but she slept. On the 3rd morning, she was running. Not from anything specific. She had started mapping the castle the 2nd day, walking its corridors slowly and carefully, the way she walked through a new forest, learning which paths led where, which ones doubled back, which doors were always guarded, and which were not. On the 3rd morning, she had found a corridor in the east wing that connected 2 sections of the castle she had not yet linked, and she was moving quickly toward it, her mind already 3 steps ahead, calculating. She turned the corner and walked directly into a wall. The wall was warm. She bounced off it and hit the floor hard, landing on her palms, and the jar of salve flew out of her bag and hit the stone and shattered. She sat on the floor and stared at the broken glass. The lavender smell rose up sharp and immediate. 3 months of work spread across the corridor stones in a pale, waxy smear. She stared at it for 5 full seconds. Then she looked up. The wall was looking down at her. It was not a wall. It was a man. Very tall, very broad, dressed in plain dark clothes with no markings that announced what he was, though something about the way he stood in the corridor made it clear that the corridor belonged to him. His face was still, not cold, still, the way deep water is still, in a way that has nothing to do with whether there is current underneath. His eyes were doing something. Mira had grown up in a healer's house. She knew what a wolf rising behind a man's eyes looked like. She had seen it twice in her village, the moment when the animal recognized something the human mind had not caught up to yet. The way the pupils swallowed the iris, slow and total, like ink dropped into water. She had never seen it look like this. It was careful. It was almost quiet. The way a man might look at something he had been told his whole life did not exist, and then found it sitting on the floor of a corridor with lavender salve on its hands. His hand moved toward her, before he had decided to move it. She watched him notice. She watched him stop. His jaw locked. His hand dropped to his side. She looked back at the broken glass. She began picking up the pieces. He crouched down to help. She said, "Don't." It came out flat and final, and surprised them both. He sat back on his heels. The Alpha King of 17 packs sat back on his heels in his own corridor and watched her collect every shard of glass, one by one, and wrap them in the headscarf she pulled from her bag. She worked carefully. She did not rush. When she had every piece she could find, she stood up. She said, "Which way is the kitchen?" He told her. His voice was low and even and gave nothing away. She walked away without looking back. The anger arrived somewhere around the third turn in the corridor, warm and familiar, rising through her chest the way it always did when she needed it, like a hand steadying her from the inside. She walked with it. It held her upright. She did not think about his eyes for the rest of the morning. She thought about them that night. The next morning, supplies appeared outside her door. Glass jars, a dozen of them. Dried herbs in labeled paper packets. Lavender, calendula, chamomile, rosemary. A stone mortar that was heavier than anything she had owned in her life. Smooth ground and expensive. No note. No request. No demand. No instruction. She brought everything inside and set it on the table, and stood looking at it for a while. Then she made the salve. She found her place in the castle infirmary by the end of the first week. Not because anyone assigned it to her, but because she walked in and started working, and no one told her to stop. The existing healer, an older man named Dove, looked at her hands the first day, and nodded, and handed her a supply list without a word. She appreciated this more than she could say. The 14-year-old girl, Fen, spent a great deal of time in the infirmary, not because she was hurt, because Mira was there. On the fourth day, Mira came back from the storage room and found Kale. She knew his name by then, Kale Drovian, though she had not spoken it out loud, sitting on the floor beside Fen's cot. Fen had been asking him something about wolves, the way 14-year-olds ask questions, without embarrassment or filter, and he was answering her. Sitting on the floor, the Alpha King of 17 packs, cross-legged on the infirmary floor, explaining what it felt like when his wolf first arrived, and Fen was listening with her chin on her knees, like this was a perfectly normal Tuesday. Mira stood in the doorway and watched for a moment. Then she left and stood in the corridor and put her hand flat against the cold stone wall. The stone did not move. It did not have a heartbeat. It did not look at her like she was something it had been waiting for. She stood there until her breathing was normal again. Then she went back inside and got to work. She had been mapping the castle for 3 weeks when she found the archive. She was not supposed to find it. It was in a locked room in the lower east wing, behind a door that looked like a storage room and was actually a records room, and the lock was old, and the hairpin from her bag and a piece of sharpened bone got her through it in under 2 minutes. The tribute ledger was on the second shelf. It was thick. It went back 40 years. She found her mother's name on page 63. Sarah Ohen, Pack District 12. Delivered, year of the third harvest cycle. Age 21. 3 years of entries, then a release notation, then nothing. Mira sat on the floor of the archive room with the ledger open on her knees and looked at her mother's name for a long time. Her mother had been 21. Mira had been born 2 years after she came home. Mira had grown up watching her mother flinch at specific sounds and avoid certain smells and wake in the night from dreams she never described. Mira had never known why. She knew now, not the specifics, but the shape of it, the long shadow of it, stretching backward through her entire life. She closed the ledger very carefully. She walked back to her room. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed. She did not move until morning. She brought the ledger to him directly. She waited until his advisors had cleared the war room. She set the book on the table in front of him. She did not ask gently. She said, "My mother's name is on page 63. He did not pretend not to understand. He told her the tribute system was 4 generations old. He told her he had been dismantling it for 9 years, one ordinance at a time, moving carefully, because 9 packs had built their inheritance structures around it, and a fast collapse would leave women in worse situations, not better. He told her the cart she had arrived in was the last one. He told her he had failed women who came before her. He said it plainly, the way someone says a thing they have said to themselves many times and stopped flinching at. He did not offer it as an excuse. He offered it as a fact. Then he said her mother's name, Sarah, the second syllable soft, the way her mother had said it herself. Mira had not told him her mother's name. She looked at him. He said, I have known who you were since the corridor. She understood then that he had been sitting across from her in the infirmary doorway, across from her at the supply table, across from 3 weeks of careful silence, knowing her name and her mother's name and the shape of why she had come here, and he had not said it, had not used it, had not reached for her with it the way it could have been used. She picked up the ledger. She told him that knowing something is wrong is not the same as stopping it. He said, I know. She told him that his wolf's recognition did not obligate her to anything. He said, I know that too. She left with the ledger. She read every name in it. It took 4 days. She read them in the evenings, after the infirmary closed, sitting at the table in her room with the good lamp Dove had lent her. Some names had only one entry, a short stay, a release. Some had years of entries. Some had no release notation. She did not let herself look away from those. She made a list. Every pack, every district, every year. On the 5th morning, she went back to the war room. She knocked this time. He said, come in. She came in. She put her list on the table next to his maps and said, which of these packs resisted you the most when you tried to end the system, and why? He looked at the list. He looked at her. He pulled out a map. They worked until dark. He explained the pack structures, the lines of authority, the places where the tribute had been woven into marriage law and inheritance rights and seasonal agreements. She asked questions. He answered them. His wolf was very still the entire time, held carefully in check, present but quiet, like a patient thing that had decided to wait. Her wolf, which she had said nothing about to anyone, was not still at all. She did not mention this. A month after she arrived, she was stitching a training wound on a guard's shoulder, a clean cut, nothing serious, the guard embarrassed about it, when Cale walked into the infirmary. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he said her name. Just that. Mira. The way her mother used to say it, before the dream started. The way it sounded when it was just a name and not a burden attached to a name. She did not look up from the stitching. Her hands stayed steady. The thread pulled even. She tied the knot, checked it, told the guard he was done. She set her tools down. She turned around. She told Cale to sit. He sat on the stool beside the table, and she took his hands, which were torn at the knuckles, as they always were, because he trained every morning and never brought his hands to her, and she cleaned them, without asking permission, and he let her. Neither of them spoke. She wrapped the knuckles in clean linen and pressed the ends down to hold. His hands were very still under hers. She let go. He did not reach for her. He did not say what this was, or what it might become. He simply sat, with his wrapped hands resting on his knees, in a room that smelled like calendula and clean linen, and waited to be whatever she decided he was allowed to be. She turned back to her supply table and began restocking the shelf. She said, I want a title. He said, name it. She said, keeper of the record. He said, done. She nodded once and kept working. Outside in the corridor, Fen was laughing at something. The big, unguarded laugh of a girl who was starting to feel safe again. The kind of laugh that had no memory in it yet, only the moment. It came through the infirmary door bright and clean. Mira listened to it and kept her hands busy. That was enough for now. That was, she decided, quite a lot.